All right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, and thank everyone for coming in virtually to our June 9th, 2020 Falls Church City School Board electronic meeting. Just start with some comments very briefly, just to remind everybody that on April 6th, the City Council adopted the emergency ordinance TO 20-12, which allows the school board to meet electronically in order to address continuity of operations associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Our electronic meetings are still open to the public. There will be an opportunity for the public to submit comments to be read at the meeting, and all the meeting notices will be posted on our website, fccps.org, with the agendas available in advance on board docs. So with that, a little bit of middle in the background. Ms. Goodell, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Ms. Dimick.
Here.
Ms. Downs.
Here.
Ms. Litton. No, Ms. Litton, okay. Mr. Reitinger.
Here.
Ms. Russell. Ms. Russell and Mr. Webb.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Will you all rise and please join me in the pledge?
I have the floor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks very much. I would seek a motion regarding the agenda. Ms. Downs.
Chair Anderson, I move that the board adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. And Ms. Goodell, will you call the vote, please?
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Dimick.
Yes.
Ms. Downs.
Yes.
Ms. Litton. Mr. Reitinger.
Yes.
Ms. Russell. No. And Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The agenda is adopted as presented. So we'll move on now to public comments, and I'll just remind folks that while the state of emergency remains in effect, due to COVID-19, written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to board members and will be read into the record. And in accordance with School Board Bylaw 2.30, the time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. I'll remind folks that you can send the written comments to our school board clerk, Marty Goodell, at goodellm@fccps.org. And Ms. Goodell, we have had a fair bit of public comment this week, so
We have.
please, I would love to hear what folks have to say. And Dr. Noonan.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Chair Anderson. Before Ms. Goodell begins the public comment, can I just manage the expectations a little bit of the folks that are here to do some other presentations for the board?
Sure.
So we've got our advanced academics team and the like, and there are, I believe, 21 public comments that need to be read, in 22 public comments that need to be read into the record. So I share that only because it might take some time, between 30 and 45 minutes. So for those of you that are here for another reason, if you want to jump off, feel free to do that and you can jump back on.
Thanks, Dr. Noonan. Ms. Goodell, please take it away.
Okay, we will start. The first comment, I'm doing these in the order that we received them. Rosalie Cosbelt sent two comments. One was to the board. I respectfully submit this comment for the school board to consider. I have 3 children in the schools, Mount Daniel, TJ, and MEH. I wish to express my sincere hope that school will open in person in the fall to the fullest extent possible. I believe that requiring temperature checks of all students who enter the building daily would be reasonable. I believe requiring guests, non-daily workers, to wear masks in the building is reasonable. I believe additional funds to do daily cleanings of the buildings would be appropriate. I do not believe children or teachers should have to wear masks or socially distance, especially in the younger grades. I do believe there should be a strict stay-at-home policy for children who are sick with any sickness or have a household member with the virus, and that notification should be sent. If these things are not possible, I hope the school board will institute every other week school, so children go to school 1 week and then do online schooling for a week. I support the school board's use of scientific information to inform their decisions. Perfection should not be the enemy of the good. And then she goes on to write about the school name changes. And she says, I support a change of the new high school name to Tinner Hill High School. And her reasoning, because we are building a new school, it is an appropriate time for our community to consider a new name and what we want the school to represent. The idea of naming the new high school after a local family worthy of recognition and in partnership with MEH is very appealing. I would support this change. She does not support changing the name of Thomas Jefferson Elementary. The reasoning, I think it is important for students to learn that we are not judged by our worst actions and that a person need not be perfect to contribute to our society. Jefferson owned slaves, but he also wrote the Declaration of Independence, a document that has inspired people all over the world and set up our nation to be what it is today. While not all sins are equivalent, moral failings are present in our heroes. Picasso was a misogynist. MLK cheated on his wife. And it's best to evaluate them because on all their characteristics, not just their worst or best ones. Just as we have Jefferson's birthday, I would support a second day to also highlight his failings and the contributions of those he owned. Monticello has excellent information on the Fawcett family, a Black family owned by Jefferson, if you want to know of other admirable men who lived there. Thomas Jefferson was a deeply flawed man, but he did contribute to our nation in positive ways that are lasting, unlike Confederate generals, and his name is worth keeping on our school. The next is from Kamal Bazaz Smith. I wanted to comment about the changing of the name conversation. I feel torn. I actually love the history of the Tinner family and love the idea of naming something in honor of them. This email is not about them per se. It just raises a question in my head. I fully endorse renaming any building, school, monument, etc. that glorifies the leaders of the Confederacy. To me, they stood against the ideals of our country. But for others, I personally think we must evaluate their contributions to the country. There are no early leaders of our country who could or should lead our country today. They were all flawed, racist, misogynist, primitive, or occasional violent men. That apparent contradiction be examined and analyzed, acknowledged, taught, and weighed. But I believe purity tests are dangerous. It's messy, and yes, George Mason was a slaveholder, but he fought to make sure slavery didn't continue. He, for better or for worse, was a founding person of this country. I think we can acknowledge that these folks were the founding people of our country and established the very unique principles of this country while knowing that they weren't perfect, and to know that they lived within the context of that time. We can't just simply erase that. For me, it isn't just about having to change a lot. I don't mind change, but I also just think that history is complicated and that we should acknowledge that people can have good and bad in them, but also that Mason, for example, did incredible things that built the foundations of this country, and that we as people can understand the complexity of it all. The next is from Deborah Roth. I support the effort to change the name of our high school. As a Falls Church City resident, I would like a community forum and other input on suggested new names, and I would like to see a plaque explaining why that would be posted prominently at the front of the new high school. What a feeling of pride that would forge. I have long considered the push to move monuments and change names of buildings and roads, etc., that honor those who advocated for slave ownership and other related horrific acts that continue to bring pain to many and mar the spirit of our country. That would be a tremendous task, and I have come to see a better solution that we should keep some as a maker of history with descriptions, ideally, that describe how important it is never to forget our past, move some to other locations, and add language of peace and such. In the case of George Mason High School, I do not think it's important to debate the merits and flaws of George Mason himself. What matters now, given the shock our country is wading through and the need to stand up for equality, unity, and human rights, is that we take a stand for our community, our students, and our future. The next is from Allison Brown and Gardner Humphreys. We advocate that the school board change the names of George Mason and Thomas Jefferson schools so that we aren't naming our schools after slave owners. We prefer the schools be named without naming them after particular people. Thank you for considering this important issue. The next is from Melissa Teets. Dear Falls Church City School Board, my husband and I appreciate you considering a discussion on the George Mason name. As you may have remembered, we have brought this issue up in the past during public comments at school board meetings and as recently as November 2019. The lack of public discourse on the name for the new high school is an issue of great concern to us. We do not feel that George Mason reflects the values of our community, nor is he relevant in our time. He was a slave holder with all its means. The GMU, Enslaved Children of George Mason's site, makes it clear. And it's quoted, in August of 1753, he had 7 enslaved children adjudged for their ages. Their names and ages were recorded in the Fairfax County Order Book for Mason for future tithable or taxable purposes. The names of these children were Ornaco 12, Sinharp 11, Juba 11, Cato 10, Beck 9, Jenny 8, and Agnes 8. From written evidence noted in the Fairfax County Order Book, it is reasonable to assume that Mason purchased these individuals from a merchant involved with human traffickers who arranged for the transportation of kidnapped boys and girls from Africa to American plantations. As I read through Mason's history, he was most concerned for individual rights as a white male landowner. The reason he did not sign our Constitution and lobbied against Virginia ratifying the Constitution was his fear of a strong federal government. He was assured that a Bill of Rights would be developed later by other delegates, and it was, but he did not trust the other states. In the end, Mason was a slave holder. He owned people. He tried to get runaway slaves back. He did not free them on his death. He did not do anything to improve the life and rights of slaves. Is he a role model for our children? Let us have a real public discussion. Let the citizens of Falls Church City decide if they want to put George Mason's name on a new high school building in the year of the 60th anniversary of desegregation of our school system. The next is from Melissa Morris. School board members, my husband Danny and I have a rising kindergartner. We have been following the emails about pandemic response as well as the more recent thread about the proposed school name change to be taken up at the meeting on Tuesday night. We are so proud to be part of such a thoughtful, inclusive community. As much as we support the name change, we understand that a name change requires additional funds. And we think our first priority should be putting together a COVID plan that gets children and school staff back into the classroom safely. Regular testing, stores of PPE, and facilities to support part-time remote learning, which will all probably be part of this plan, all require a piece of the 2020-2021 budget, a budget that we understand has already been lowered by almost 2.5 million because of the pandemic. And most importantly, less than 3 months from the start of the school year, we still don't know what the plan is for the fall. If we have the funds to do everything, then fabulous. If we have to pick and choose, we believe the health and safety of our children and school staff should be the first priority during these unprecedented times. As 2 working parents, we also would very much appreciate knowing earlier rather than later what the proposed plan is for the fall, or even what the plans are that are being considered. At this point, any insight into likely scenarios would be incredibly helpful as we navigate childcare issues. Thanks so much for all. We really appreciate everything you are doing to support our families and the community. We hope you are all well, and we look forward to our first year in the FCCPS system. The next is from Ellen Gilmore. I am writing to show my support for not only having a high school name change discussion added to the agenda for discussion, but support that the new high school name be changed. New school, new decade, and the time is now to start reflecting our community's values. I do not support having a school name named after a living or deceased person, as history is showing that this can be problematic at best. I support a name change that reflects a place, physical environment, and/or values. I recommend that the school board considering changing the name to Tinner Hill High School, as it represents the greater Falls Church community and the rich history of the community. Thank you for regarding my email, and I support and request that the school board add this to the agenda. Wynn Singleton wrote, I oppose any name change for George Mason High School. I graduated from GMHS in '67, my older brother in '65, my sister in '70, my youngest brother in '81, and my 2 daughters in '98 and in 2001. As a history major, I find this talk of removing names of historical figures is starting to get way too politically correct. Use this sole standard, and George Washington's name would need to be removed universally, since he was a slave owner too. 7 other US presidents were slaveholders. We recognize the accomplishments of many people, even though that they had their shortcomings in life. George Mason was a Virginia patriot. Once independence was declared in 1776, he was the principal architect of the Virginia's Declaration of Rights. In 1787, Mason, Washington, and James Madison, also a slave owner, later elected our 4th president, were Virginia delegates to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. There, Mason vigorously opposed the provision that allowed the slave trade to continue until 1808, despite himself a slave holder, referring to it as a disgraceful